I was 3 steps from the front door, separation packet in my bag, when I stopped in the hallway and heard my husband laugh like the ending was already written. He thought I was signing away a company I built from nothing and the building my father left me. He had spent months teaching another woman how to wear my life, never imagining I held the final lock. His victory lap had just become my evidence. My name is Morgan Allen. I am 39 years old, and for the past 12 years, my life has been defined by a singular, relentless pursuit building Northline procurement risk from a borrowed desk in a windowless room into a powerhouse compliance and vendor audit firm in Indianapolis. I built my reputation by advising public sector buyers and regional institutions on how to spot the things people try to hide. I hunt down fraud exposure, manage emergency purchasing oversight, and orchestrate contract recovery. I am the person people call when the numbers do not add up, when a vendor seems too good to be true, when someone is skimming off the top of a municipal budget. My entire professional existence relies on seeing the details other people gloss over, and yet, for the last 12 months, I missed every single warning sign inside my own house. My marriage to Daniel Mercer, who just turned 42, was the kind of partnership that looked flawless from the curb. We had the smart house with the synchronized lighting, the shared morning routines involving expensive coffee grounds, the dinners at the exact same table at the exact same time, and the curated circle of professional friends who admired our stability. But a marriage does not usually explode all at once. Usually, it just slowly loses heat. For the last year, living with Daniel felt like sitting in a room where someone had quietly left the window open in the dead of winter. The chill crept in so gradually that I convinced myself it was just the weather. We tried counseling, or at least the pantomime of it. We sat on beige couches and used those polite, weaponized statements the therapist suggested for a few months. But the distance between us only widened into a chasm. Then, Daniel shifted his approach. The passive-aggressive silence evaporated, replaced by an oddly calm, almost clinical push for what he called a clean, private separation. He was so reasonable about it. He told me we both deserved happiness, that we had simply outgrown our shared shape, that there was no need to drag our lives through the mud of a contentious divorce. He played the part of the weary but respectful soon-to-be ex-husband perfectly. I was exhausted. Running Northline took 80 hours a week, and the emotional toll of a failing marriage had drained whatever reserves I had left. I just wanted peace. I did not want war. I wanted to wake up in a house that did not feel like a waiting room. So, when Daniel presented the preliminary settlement papers, framing them as standard transitional documents meant to protect us both, I agreed to sign them. Which brings me to this morning. It is a gray Monday. The kind of overcast Indianapolis morning where the sky looks like a bruised slate and the air feels heavy with impending rain. I am dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, my version of armor for an early meeting with my attorney. The separation packet is sitting heavy in my leather tote by the front door. I am practically out of the house, my hand hovering near the brass doorknob, when I realize my phone battery is hovering at 10%. I need my charger if I'm going to be stuck in legal meetings all day. I drop my bag on the console table and walk back down the long hardwood hallway toward the master suite. The house is completely quiet, insulated by thick drywall and expensive windows, which is why the sound carrying out of the kitchen catches me so off guard. Daniel is in the kitchen. He is on speakerphone. I stop walking. I am 3 steps away from the archway that leads into the open living space. I do not recognize the voice on the other end of the line at first. I only recognize the tone. It is a woman, and she sounds amused, deeply relaxed, and intimately familiar with my husband. It is the distinct sound of 2 people discussing a difficult job that is already safely finished. It is the tone of conspirators sharing a private joke after the bank has been successfully robbed. I hold my breath, pressing my back against the cool plaster of the hallway wall, completely out of sight. I close my eyes, trying to process the sudden intrusion of this stranger's voice into my quiet morning. Once she signs the continuity affidavit, the woman says, her voice echoing slightly off the marble countertops, crisp and unbothered. The valuation drops exactly where we need it, and everything routes through my company clean. I freeze. My pulse does not spike. It remains steady, beating with a slow, heavy rhythm that actually frightens me far more than blind panic would. This is the biological response of prey realizing the predator is not out in the woods, but already inside the den. The continuity affidavit. The document Daniel had casually slid across the kitchen island 3 days ago, promising it was just administrative boilerplate required by the state to separate our shared liabilities. Daniel answers with a laugh. It is a rich, easy sound that I have not heard aimed at me in over 2 years. Do not worry about the timeline, Daniel says, his voice dripping with absolute confidence. Morgan has been too exhausted to read the fine print for weeks. By the end of the week, she will have handed everything over herself. She just wants it to be over. He takes a sip of his coffee. I can hear the ceramic mug touch the granite island, a sharp domestic clink that anchors the surreal moment in reality. Just make sure the operating agreements are locked on your end. Sierra, Daniel adds. I am not leaving anything to chance. This has to be airtight before she realizes what the numbers actually mean. Sierra Vale. I hear the name and file it away in a vault inside my mind, locking it behind steel doors. I do not gasp. I do not burst into the kitchen and scream at him. I do not throw plates or demand an explanation. The woman who would have done that died the second she heard the words continuity affidavit spoken in that specific, predatory cadence. Instead, my training takes over. The auditor wakes up. The woman who dissects financial ruin for a living takes the wheel. I quietly turn around. I place each foot softly on the hardwood, ensuring the floorboards do not creak. I retrace my steps down the hallway, bypassing the front door and my leather tote containing the unsigned papers. I walk straight into my private study. I step inside and gently push the heavy oak door shut until I hear the brass latch click into place. I turn the deadbolt. I stand in the center of the room, surrounded by my filing cabinets, my law books, and 12 years of hard-won success, and let the cold realization wash over me. The peaceful divorce was a fiction. The amicable separation was a sedative he administered, so I would not feel the knife going in. Daniel did not want a clean break. He wanted my life's work. He had spent the last 12 months teaching another woman how to wear my life, how to absorb my assets, how to take the company I built with my own hands. The continuity affidavit, the document he swore was just procedural red tape, was the key to the entire heist. By signing it, I would willingly devalue North Lane procurement risk and hand the pieces over to whatever shadow company this Sierra Vale was running. He thinks I am tired. He thinks I am beaten. He thinks I am one signature away from surrendering my entire world to him and walking away empty-handed. In one cold, clarifying instant, I understand everything. This divorce was never supposed to be fair. It was only ever supposed to be efficient. And the only reason his plan almost worked is because he underestimated the one thing he should have feared the most, my absolute inability to let a discrepancy go unexamined. I unlock my phone. My hands are remarkably steady. I open the message thread with Helena Price, my attorney. I type out the words quickly, hitting send before any residual doubt can slow my fingers down. Do not file. I need a closed-door meeting today. That is the first domino. The physical act of stopping the legal machinery from moving forward grounds me. I am no longer a grieving partner standing on the precipice of a broken marriage. I am looking at a crime scene. I move to the heavy oak filing cabinets lining the far wall of my study. The top drawer holds the mundane. The bottom drawer's the vault. I pull out the thick, red-tabbed folders holding my ownership documents, the commercial insurance files, the complex trust paperwork my father established before he passed, and the original operating agreement for the firm. I spread them across the massive mahogany desk. I treat my own life exactly the way I treat a municipal client under a fraud review. When you audit a public agency, You never look at the big numbers first. You look at the edges. You look for the places where authority overlaps and oversight gets blurry. For the past 2 years, Daniel had volunteered to take over organizing the household books and our joint accounts. He said I was carrying too much weight, that he wanted to take the domestic administration off my plate. At the time, it felt like profound support. A husband stepping up to help his overworked spouse. Now, staring at the rows of bank statements, that support feels like what it actually was: access. Unrestricted, unmonitored access to the plumbing of my financial life. I open my laptop and bypass the summary dashboards, drilling straight into the raw transaction ledgers for our primary joint accounts over the last 24 months. On the surface, the outflows look entirely ordinary. Groceries, utilities, dry cleaning, mortgage payments, landscaping, but my eyes are trained to see anomalies in the rhythm of spending. Fraud is rarely a sudden, violent extraction. Fraud is a parasite. It takes a little at a time, just enough to stay under the host's radar. I spot the first inconsistency in a ledger entry from 8 months ago. A transfer labeled as a design retainer for $2,500. We were not remodeling. A month later, another outgoing wire listed as staging costs for $3,100. Then, a series of advisory deposits, escalating slowly. $4,000, $4,800. I start pulling these line items, dropping them into a fresh spreadsheet. I cross-reference the payment destinations. Every single one of these ambiguous, vendor-like transfers routes back to a single limited liability company, an entity I have never heard of, buried under a registered agent in a different state. I highlight the column and hit the sum function. The total blinks back at me. $62,000. $62,000 moved in quiet. Methodical increments out of our shared assets and into a black box. He financed his own exit strategy using my money. The sheer audacity of it burns away the last remnants of my grief, leaving behind a cold, sharp clarity. When I log the transfers into my master spreadsheet, I do not just record the dates and amounts. I look at the velocity of the money. At first, the disguised payments were spaced out, one every 2 months. Then, they became monthly. Recently, they shifted to bi-weekly. This is the classic acceleration pattern of an embezzler who has grown comfortable. Someone who believes they have beaten the system and no longer needs to be cautious. He was getting greedy, and greed always leaves footprints. I push the ledger aside and reach into my leather tote, which I had quietly brought into the study. I pull out the thick separation packet. I flip past the standard division of property and land on the draft attachment Daniel had been so keen for me to sign. The continuity affidavit. He had dismissed it as a procedural necessity. A boring piece of paper required to decouple our names from the business liabilities. I read the fine print. I read it the way a lawyer reads a hostile contract. The language is dense, buried in transitional jargon, but the architecture of the trap is undeniably clear. The affidavit includes a clause regarding transitional control and valuation timing. If I sign this document, I agree to lock in the firm's valuation at a specifically depressed baseline, ostensibly due to the disruption of the divorce. But more dangerously, it grants temporary administrative oversight to an external consulting party during the separation period to ensure operational continuity. It is a Trojan horse. He was building a bridge right into the center of my company, and he wanted me to hand him the hammer and nails. I pick up my phone again and dial Tessa Dunn. Tessa is not just my closest friend. She is a forensic accountant who can smell a manipulated balance sheet from a mile away. I trust her implicitly, because Tessa notices the exact things that other people are desperate to explain away. She answers on the second ring. "I need you to listen to me," I say, my voice dropping to a low, flat register. "Do not interrupt until I am finished." I walk her through the discoveries of the last hour. The shell company, the disguised payments, the $62,000, the toxic clauses hidden inside the continuity affidavit. I strip all the emotion out of my delivery, presenting the facts like a prosecutor laying out an opening statement. Every cell I populated in the spreadsheet had hardened my resolve, and by the time I finished speaking to her, the sorrow that threatened to drown me has entirely evaporated. I am compartmentalizing the betrayal, locking the emotional wreckage in a mental box and throwing away the key. There will be time to mourn the death of my marriage later. Right now, I have a corporate siege to repel. Tessa is silent for a long, heavy moment when I finish. I can hear the sound of her typing rapidly on her end, already opening search portals. "Morgan," Tessa says, her tone sharp and intensely focused. "Do not accuse anyone yet. Do not confront him. You cannot tip the room. If he knows you are looking, he will start destroying the digital paper trail before we can clone it." "I have the statements," I reply, my eyes tracking over the spreadsheet. "Statements are not enough," she insists. "We need the metadata. We need the routing numbers. We need the incorporation documents for that shell company. Do not let your anger make you sloppy." You smile at him. You ask him how his day is going, and you do not sign a single piece of paper. Do not even sign a parking receipt until Helena and I review every single page of that separation packet. "I understand," I say. "He thinks you are a tired, distracted wife," Tessa says, her voice hardening into something lethal. "Let him keep thinking that. We are going to bury him in his own arrogance." I end the call. The house is still quiet. I can hear the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Soon, I hear the sound of Daniel moving around, the jingle of his car keys, the heavy thud of the front door closing as he leaves for his usual midday lunch appointment, probably to meet her, I think, but the thought does not sting the way it should. It just feels like another data point in an ongoing investigation. By the time his car pulls out of the driveway, the transformation is complete. I have built the first master spreadsheet. I have printed the suspect transfers and locked the hard copies in my fireproof safe. I have wiped my search history and cleared the recent file access logs on our shared network. I am no longer the exhausted woman desperate for a peaceful resolution. I have shifted mentally, entirely and irreversibly, from a wife into an investigator. The man I married has just declared war on my life. But he made one fatal, catastrophic mistake. He forgot what I do for a living. The elevator doors part silently on the 42nd floor. Helena Price's downtown office smells of polished leather, ozone, and strong coffee gone slightly bitter on the burner. I do not sit in the plush waiting area. I walk straight past the receptionist, who nods in recognition, and push open the heavy glass door to the corner conference room. Helena is already at the table. She is a woman who treats the law not as a shield, but as a scalpel. I drop my leather tote onto a chair, unfasten the clasp of my envelope, and begin to lay out the morning's harvest across the polished mahogany. I do not cry. I do not shake. I simply deliver the briefing. I recount the precise words spoken on the speakerphone, the tonal intimacy between my husband and the woman on the other end, and the structural map of the financial bleeding I just spent the last 2 hours uncovering. Finally, I slide the drafted continuity affidavit across the table, tapping the specific paragraph regarding transitional control with my index finger. Helena reads. She does not interrupt to offer sympathetic platitudes. She does not ask me how I am feeling. She knows that if I'm sitting in this room, my feelings have already been subordinated to my survival. She traces the lines of the drafted settlement with a gold pen, her eyes darting between the affidavit and the printed ledgers I brought her. When she finally looks up, her expression is entirely devoid of warmth, which is exactly why I hired her. "This is not a man who stumbled into an affair," Helena says, her voice smooth and dangerously quiet. "This is a man executing a highly sophisticated corporate extraction. He is trying to control the timing, the valuation, and the public perception all at once. An affair is a distraction. This is a hostile takeover." I lean back, crossing my arms. "He thinks the company is vulnerable because I am exhausted. He thinks the company is vulnerable because he misunderstands the architecture you built. Helena corrects her. She pulls out a legal pad. Let us look at the structural reality. Your firm cannot be transferred or divided by marital assumption alone. You made sure of that. She is right. 3 years ago, we audited a dishonest subcontractor who attempted to retaliate by exploiting a vague indemnification clause to freeze our operating accounts. It was a terrifying month that nearly bankrupted my payroll. The moment the dust settled, I brought in specialized corporate counsel and completely rewrote the firm's operating agreements. I built layers of signatory control, poison pills, and proxy requirements into the very DNA of the business. Daniel knows he cannot simply demand half the equity in a divorce petition. The structural safeguards would instantly block a direct transfer of ownership. Because he cannot take it directly, Helena continues, tapping the continuity affidavit. He needs a backdoor. That is what this document is. It is a very dangerous, very clever opening. She turns the document around so I can read the highlighted section. If you sign this while the company is artificially undervalued, she explains, you are legally conceding that the business is distressed due to the marital dissolution. The language here grants an external consultant the authority to stabilize the transition. If Sierra's firm steps into that role with a signed mandate from you, they can generate a massive paper trail. They can justify a transitional stake in the equity. They can grant themselves unrestricted consulting access to your client lists. Or worse, they can manufacture creditor-style leverage by billing you exorbitant management fees that you are legally bound to pay before the divorce is finalized. They drain the company from the inside out, and you hand them the keys to do it. A cold knot tightens in my stomach as the full scope of his architecture becomes visible. It is elegant in its malice. And he did not just want to leave me. He wanted me to finance his new life with the corpse of my own. There is more, Helena says, shifting gears and pulling a file related to my personal assets. Let us talk about the brick and mortar. She points to a secondary clause buried deep in the property division addendum. It references the downtown office building that houses my firm. That building was premarital property, left to me by my father and securely held within the Allen family trust. It is untouchable. He cannot take the building outright, Helena says, reading my mind. But look at this restructuring language tied to the separation timeline. He is attempting to entangle it. He wants to claim that marital funds were used to offset the property taxes or maintain the trust over the last few years. If you agree to this clause, you legitimize that claim. He would force a false restructuring event, demanding a massive cash buyout to satisfy his manufactured share of the equity. He wants the company and the real estate, I say, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Helena turns to her computer monitor. Her fingers fly across the keyboard as she accesses the state's corporate registry. Let us look at the vehicle they plan to use. Within a minute, she pulls up the public filing. Vale Meridian Strategies. Helena reads aloud. A limited liability company. It was formed exactly 4 months ago. The filing activity was expedited. The scope of business is listed as broad corporate consulting and transitional management. It is a hollow shell, perfectly shaped to absorb your assets. I stare at the screen. 4 months ago, Daniel and I were sitting in a therapist's office, holding hands, while he told a professional counselor that he was committed to finding our way back to each other. He was filing the paperwork for my execution while looking me dead in the eye and promising me a future. Helena closes the laptop screen and folds her hands on the desk. The legal map is fully illuminated. We can see every trench, every tripwire, every weapon he has aimed at my life. Clients facing this kind of clean, paper-based fraud always ask me how the perpetrator expects to get away with it, Helena says, her tone shifting into something fiercely mentoring. They always think the other side is too smart to leave a trail. But I will tell you what I tell them. The greed is never the first mistake. The confidence is. I look at the continuity affidavit. The signature line at the bottom is blank. It is a cliff he is waiting for me to walk off. He thinks I am too tired to fight, I say softly. Then let him keep thinking exactly that, Helena replies, her eyes locking onto mine. Do not confront him. Do not show him a single flash of anger. Do not expose what you know. You go home, and you play the part he wrote for you. You be the exhausted, overwhelmed wife who is still rushing through the days, still too blinded by the grief of a failing marriage to read the fine print. She reaches into her desk and pulls out a heavy, empty binder. She begins moving my ledgers, my notes, and her printed research into the rings. We are going to build a new reality, she says as she snaps the rings shut. We need them to commit to this fraud in a way they cannot retract. We cannot just show that he planned it. We have to let him execute a piece of it, right into a trap we control. She slides the thick binder across the table toward me. It is no longer just a collection of documents. It is a legal roadmap. Make them move first, Helena instructs, her voice a low, commanding hum. And make them do it on the public record. I stand up and take the binder. Its weight in my hands is deeply grounding. When I walked into this office an hour ago, I was a woman bracing for an impact. As I turn toward the door to leave, I am something else entirely. I am the impact. I will go home. I will pour him a glass of wine, and I will let him believe I am exactly one signature away from folding. I'm back at my desk the next morning when my encrypted messaging app pings. It is Tessa. She does not bother with greetings. She just sends data. I open the file she transmitted and stare at the digital ghost of the woman who intends to dismantle my life. Sierra Vale is 41 years old. On paper, she markets herself as a high-end turnaround strategist for distressed corporate firms. She has a sleek website with vague, inspirational copy about operational synergy and transitional efficiency. But Tessa does not look at marketing copy. She looks at public court indices, tax liens, and bankruptcy filings. Tessa's notes highlight the reality beneath the polished veneer. 2 of Sierra's prior consulting ventures dissolved abruptly in the last 5 years, both collapsing immediately following bitter creditor disputes. There is also a record of a state licensing complaint regarding unethical billing practices, but it quietly disappeared from the public docket 18 months ago, likely settled under a strict non-disclosure agreement. Sierra is not a savior for struggling companies. She is a scavenger. She finds weakness and extracts whatever capital is left before the entity dies. But the most damning piece of information Tessa uncovers is buried in the corporate registration for Vale Meridian Strategies. The limited liability company was filed exactly 4 months earlier, right around the time Daniel first suggested couples therapy. On the state incorporation form, under the mandatory secondary contact field, there is a phone number. Tessa ran a trace on it. It does not route to Sierra's office or a registered agent. It routes to a secondary mobile device registered under Daniel's name. A burner phone. My husband is not just sleeping with Sierra Vale. He is in business with her. I sit back in my chair, the leather creaking in the silent office. Sierra is not a side affair he accidentally fell into during a midlife crisis. She is the load-bearing pillar of his exit strategy. She is the structure around which he has been meticulously rebuilding his future. An hour later, Helena calls me on my direct line. Her voice is brisk, carrying the momentum of a new discovery. She had put a private investigator on Daniel's recent email traffic and calendar appointments. Utilizing the legal discovery parameters we were quietly preparing. He is already scouting real estate, Helena says, the disdain evident in her sharp articulation. I have copies of communications between your husband and a commercial leasing agent. I press the phone closer to my ear. Where? Across town, Helena replies. A premium Class A building in the financial district. He sent the broker a letter of intent outlining the space requirements for what he called a new procurement advisory platform. He told the broker they would be ready to sign the lease and take occupancy immediately following your supposed transition out of your own firm. He is timing his launch to coincide perfectly with your collapse. The sheer scale of the conspiracy makes my chest tight. He is not just taking my money to leave. He is using my money to build a replica of my own company. a competitor positioned to cannibalize the market share I spent over a decade securing. He is attempting to step into the vacuum he plans to create by forcing me out. That evening, the atmosphere in our house is suffocatingly normal. I am in the kitchen pouring a glass of sparkling water when my phone vibrates on the granite counter. It is a text message from Daniel, who is sitting just 20 feet away in the living room, watching a muted television screen. "Hey," the message reads. "Just checking in. Are we still okay signing everything by Friday? I know you are overwhelmed, and I just want to get this off your plate so you can breathe." The casual, empathetic tone of the text makes the betrayal feel infinitely more deliberate. It is an act of supreme psychological violence, wrapped in the guise of spousal concern. He is weaponizing his knowledge of my fatigue. He is using the intimacy we shared, the cadence of how we communicate, to push me toward the edge of the cliff. Every single word is a calculated nudge to keep the illusion alive. I force myself to type a response that mirrors the woman he thinks I am. A woman who is battered, tired, and desperate for the bleeding to stop. "Yes," I type back. "Friday works. I just want the whole process finished cleanly. Thank you for handling the details." I hit send. A moment later, I hear him shift on the sofa. I glance toward the living room and see the faint, satisfied smile playing on his lips as he reads my reply. He thinks he has won. Later that night, the house settles into darkness. Daniel goes upstairs to take a shower before bed. I hear the water running through the pipes, a steady, masking noise. I walk into the den, where we keep the family tablet charging on a side table. It is a shared device, mostly used for reading news or controlling the smart home features. But sometimes Daniel uses it to quickly check his email when he does not want to boot up his laptop. I pick it up and unlock the screen. My hands move with a cold, mechanical precision. I do not go to his email. He is too careful for that. Instead, I open the cloud storage application and check the recently accessed files cache. People always remember to delete the primary document, but they rarely remember to clear the local cache on a shared device. There it is, a file named Project Meridian Launch Deck. I tap the icon. The presentation deck loads onto the screen, glowing brightly in the dim room. The cover slide features a sleek, minimalist logo for Vail Meridian Strategies. But as I swipe to the second slide, my breath catches in my throat. It is my work. The formatting has been altered, the fonts changed, and the color scheme shifted to Sierra's branding. But the underlying architecture is unmistakably mine. It is the exact growth pitch I developed 3 years ago to secure our largest municipal contracts. He has taken my proprietary risk models, my vendor audit methodologies, and my compliance frameworks. I swipe to the next slide and see my specific client categories mapped out, stripped of their identifying logos, but retaining the exact financial metrics and demographic profiles I spent thousands of hours compiling. He did not just steal the template, he stole the engine. I stare at the glowing screen while the sound of the shower echoes from the floor above. The true insult finally crystallizes, sharp and devastating. The affair was nothing. The stolen money was just logistics. The real violation is this. Daniel did not only cheat on me, he sat next to me on the couch for years, asking me about my day, listening to my strategies, and studying my life's work long enough to meticulously package it for resale. He studied me not to love me, but to replace me. I close the file, clear the cache exactly as I found it, and set the tablet back on the charger. I walk to the base of the stairs and listen to the water turn off. The man I married is stepping out of the shower, drying off, entirely unaware that the woman waiting downstairs is no longer his victim. She is the one holding the evidence now. The annual Municipal Endowment Gala is the kind of mandatory social event that requires an iron stomach even on a good day. It is a room filled with politicians, regional directors, and the people who fund them, all smiling over flutes of mediocre champagne. I cannot skip it. 2 key clients from the state public purchasing boards are guaranteed to be in attendance, and in my business, visibility is synonymous with stability. What I did not expect was Daniel insisting on coming with me. He stood in our bedroom earlier that evening, adjusting the cuffs of his tuxedo, and told me it was crucial we maintain appearances. He said that a sudden absence would spark rumors, and he wanted my clients to see us as a united front while the separation was being finalized. He played the part of the supportive, amicable ex-husband so flawlessly that for a fleeting second, I almost admired his sociopathy. He did not want to protect my reputation. He wanted to be in the room with my network. He wanted to shake hands with the very people he was preparing to steal. We walk into the grand ballroom of the downtown hotel just after 7 o'clock. The air is thick with the scent of expensive floral arrangements and roasted tenderloin. Daniel places a warm hand on the small of my back as we navigate through the crowd. The gesture makes my skin crawl, but I force my muscles to remain relaxed. I am wearing a black silk gown, holding a glass of sparkling water, and projecting the aura of a woman who has everything entirely under control. Then, I see her. It is the first time I have ever laid eyes on Sierra Vale in person. She is standing near a towering ice sculpture on the far side of the room, engaged in conversation with a city councilman. My breath catches for a fraction of a second, not out of fear, but out of cold recognition. She is incredibly polished. She wears a tailored sapphire dress that speaks of quiet, accumulated wealth. Her posture is impeccable, her expression composed and professionally magnetic. She is exactly the kind of woman who knows how to look perfectly legitimate from 20 feet away. She does not look like a woman hiding in the shadows of someone else's marriage. She looks like an apex predator holding court. I sip my water and watch the room. Daniel leaves my side to fetch us drinks from the bar. I keep my gaze soft and unfocused, but I am tracking every movement. Daniel and Sierra never approach each other. They never stand too close. They do not exchange secret smiles or lingering touches. If you were not looking for it, you would assume they were strangers. But I am looking for it. I see the choreography. It is a masterclass in invisible rhythm. When Daniel moves toward the east side of the room, Sierra casually drifts toward the west, ensuring they are never caught in the same conversational circle. Yet, right before he turns a corner, his eyes flick toward her for exactly 1 second. She touches the stem of her wineglass in response. It is a subtle, syncopated dance of two people who are already operating as a single unit, communicating across a crowded room without making a sound. It is infuriatingly arrogant. I turn away from the display and spot Lena Ortiz near the silent auction tables. Lena is the procurement director for the Midland Health Purchasing Consortium, one of Northline's oldest and most lucrative accounts. She is a sharp, no-nonsense woman who values loyalty above almost everything else. I approach her with a warm smile, ready to discuss the upcoming fiscal quarter. We exchange the standard pleasantries about the gala and the weather. But Lena's smile does not reach her eyes. She glances around to ensure no one is standing too close, then gently places a hand on my arm and pulls me a few steps into a quiet alcove draped in heavy velvet curtains. "Morgan," Lena says, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Are you really stepping back from the firm?" The question hits me like a physical blow. I freeze every muscle in my face, refusing to let my shock register. I keep my expression pleasantly neutral, tilting my head slightly as if confused by the premise. "Stepping back?" I ask, my tone light and entirely steady. "Whatever gave you that idea?" Lena frowns, looking genuinely troubled. "I received a phone call on Tuesday morning. A woman from an outfit called Vale Meridian Strategies. She told my office she was calling to formally confirm the post-separation transition authority on two of Northline's largest accounts. She implied that due to your impending divorce, you were stepping down from day-to-day operations, and her firm was stepping in to manage the continuity of our contracts." The blood roars in my ears. I am standing in a ballroom surrounded by hundreds of people, but the world narrows down to Lena's face. This is it. This is the first tangible, outside proof that Daniel and Sierra have already started selling a future I never agreed to create. They are not just planning to steal my clients, They are actively attempting to hijack my accounts while I'm still sitting in the CEO chair. It is textbook tortious interference. Lena, I appreciate you bringing this to me, I say, my voice smooth and commanding. There has been a severe administrative miscommunication. I am going through a private separation. Yes, but my position at Northline remains absolute. No external firm has been authorized to manage your contracts. I will have my legal team address this impersonation immediately. Lena exhales a sigh of profound relief. Thank God. We only do business with you. Morgan, not some transitional consultant we have never met. I assure her that her accounts are perfectly secure, excuse myself with a graceful nod, and walk back into the main ballroom. The adrenaline is burning through my veins like battery acid, but I do not let a single drop of it show on my face. An hour later, the dinner service concludes, and the crowd begins to thin. I am standing near the coat check, waiting for Daniel, when a loud, booming voice calls out his name. It is Patrick Hales. Patrick is an older, incredibly wealthy donor who knows Daniel through various commercial real estate circles. He is the kind of man who drinks too much scotch and speaks without a filter. He claps Daniel heavily on the shoulder, nearly spilling his drink. Daniel, my boy, Patrick booms, his voice carrying over the dull roar of the lobby. Good to see you taking the leap. You have been bragging for weeks about finally building something of your own. Glad to see you are getting out from under the wife's shadow and setting up your own shop. The silence that falls over our small circle is deafening. Daniel's face flushes a deep, sudden crimson. He shoots a panicked, terrifyingly transparent look in my direction, his meticulously crafted mask slipping completely off his face for the first time all night. Patrick, you must have misunderstood, Daniel stammers, his voice tight and unnaturally high. I was just speaking hypothetically about some future investment ideas. Nonsense, Patrick laughs, oblivious to the destruction he just caused. You told me you were launching a procurement advisory platform. Even asked me about leasing rates in the financial district. Do not be modest now. I look at my husband. I look at the absolute terror swimming in his eyes. He is waiting for me to scream. He is waiting for me to demand an explanation right here in the lobby of the hotel. He thinks the explosive confrontation is about to happen. Instead, I offer Patrick a radiant, blinding smile. Daniel is always looking for new challenges, I say smoothly, slipping my arm through Daniel's rigid one. I am so incredibly proud of his ambition. We really should be getting home, though. It has been a long evening. Daniel swallows hard, nodding mutely. We walk to the car in complete silence. The drive home is heavy, thick with his paranoia. He keeps glancing at me from the driver's seat, trying to read my face in the passing streetlights, desperately trying to figure out if I understood what Patrick meant. I stare out the window, looking at the dark city, and say absolutely nothing. We arrive home. Daniel practically sprints upstairs, claiming a sudden migraine. I walk straight into my study and lock the door behind me. I do not cry. I do not throw a glass against the wall. I sit down at my desk, turn on the small brass lamp, and open a fresh legal pad. I write down every single word I can remember from the reception. I write down Lena Ortiz's exact phrasing about the phone call. I write down the date and time of the interaction. I document Patrick Hales's entire conversation, word for word. I catalog the visual confirmation of Sierra Vale's presence and her unspoken coordination with Daniel. His arrogance is making him careless in public. He is so eager to inhabit his stolen future that he is leaving a trail of witnesses who will be able to testify to his premeditation. I pull out my phone and open the encrypted messaging application. I select Helena's contact name. I type out the summary of the night's intelligence, detailing the attempted tortious interference with my municipal clients and the public admission of his shadow company. They are moving early, I type. They are trying to poach the accounts before the separation is even filed. He is getting sloppy. Helena's reply comes through 3 minutes later. Good. A sloppy enemy is a predictable enemy. Are you ready? I look around my quiet study, at the walls I bought, the business I built, and the life he tried to dismantle. My pulse is a slow, steady drumbeat. I am not a victim anymore. I am the architect of his ruin. Yes, I type back. Let us build the trap. The creation of a perfect lie requires far more truth than fiction. If you want to trap a thief, you cannot offer them something obviously worthless, and you cannot offer them something flawlessly secure. You have to give them something that looks like an accidental vulnerability. You have to offer them a window left cracked open in a house they already believe they own. We spend Tuesday morning in the war room of Helena's office engineering exactly that window. Tessa sits beside me, her fingers flying across her keyboard. While Helena paces the length of the conference table, we are building a decoy asset packet. It has to be a masterpiece of forensic manipulation, designed to be completely irresistible to my husband and absolutely fatal to his exit strategy. I provide the foundation of truth. I pull the real property descriptions for the commercial spaces, the genuine organizational charts for my firm, and the actual vendor categorization lists. To a casual observer, or a greedy spouse rushing to steal a competitive advantage, the packet looks like the holy grail of my corporate portfolio. But the architecture beneath the surface is rigged. Tessa adjusts the valuation numbers, deflating the projected revenues by precisely 15%, mirroring the depressed narrative Daniel has been trying to establish. Then, Helena deliberately omits one critical control clause from the ownership summary. It is a clause that explicitly prevents unilateral asset transfer. By removing it from this decoy packet, we are showing Daniel a clear, unobstructed path to seize the capital he needs for his new venture. We are showing him an open door. But the most dangerous elements of the packet are the ghosts I invent. I instruct Tessa to insert a fabricated reference to an inactive reserve account, purportedly holding a substantial cash buffer. I also create a completely misleading supplier authorization code, labeling it as Authorization Code Delta 927. Neither the account nor the code actually exists in the real world. They are completely meaningless to my day-to-day operations. However, if someone were preparing an unauthorized legal filing or attempting to claim transitional authority over my firm, they would absolutely need to include those specific references to prove they had comprehensive access to my books. If they use the authorization code, they implicate themselves. I told Helena, running my finger along the printed line on the draft. It shows they didn't simply make a fortunate guess. It proves they possessed and utilized stolen, proprietary information. Exactly, Helena says, picking up a fresh legal pad. And while you are baiting the hook, I am building the cage. Helena prepares a parallel, time-stamped legal memo. The memo details the exact creation of the decoy packet, explicitly identifying the false reserve account and the fabricated authorization code. It outlines the precise criminal statutes and civil liabilities that will be triggered the moment anyone attempts to leverage the fake material in a formal capacity. She signs it, notarizes it, and locks it in her firm's vault. The trap is now officially on the record. The final touch belongs to Tessa. While I print the physical pages, Tessa embeds a series of highly sophisticated, traceable digital markers into the electronic version of the packet. She drops the file onto a secure partition of my home network, the one Daniel thinks he secretly knows the password to. The file contains a silent beacon. The moment it is opened, copied, or transmitted, it will ping Tessa's monitoring software with the exact time, location, and destination IP address of the user. I leave the law office with the printed decoy packet secured in a slim, unremarkable manila folder. The drive home feels different today. The ambient dread that has suffocated me for months is entirely gone, replaced by a cold, operational focus. I arrive at the house just before 5 o'clock. The residence is quiet. I walk into my private study, the room Daniel has been circling like a shark for weeks. I place the slim folder on the absolute edge of my mahogany desk. I do not hide it under a stack of mail, but I do not leave it perfectly centered, either. I angle it slightly, leaving the top flap resting open just enough to reveal the bold header Master Valuation and Asset Transition Summary. I leave it exactly where a snooping spouse would assume a stressed, overworked woman had dropped it by accident after a long meeting. I also leave my desktop computer powered on. The screen asleep but unlocked, directly connected to the home network where the digital file is waiting. An hour later, I hear the heavy thud of the front door closing. Daniel is home. I walk into the kitchen and pour 2 glasses of water as he walks down the hallway. I pick up my cell phone and hold it to my ear, pretending to be on a call with my attorney. I make sure my voice is just loud enough to carry through the open archway. Helena, I am just so relieved, I say into the dead phone, forcing a tired sigh into my voice. Yes, this finally feels simpler. I left the master's summary packet on my desk, and I will go over the transition notes tonight. I am just glad it is almost over. I end the fake call just as Daniel steps into the kitchen. He freezes for a fraction of a second, his eyes darting toward the hallway that leads to my study. Before his face relaxes into a mask of gentle concern, he took the bait. I can practically see the gears grinding behind his eyes. He has been waiting for something easy to forward to Sierra, something that bypasses the complex firewalls I usually maintain. Rough day, Daniel asks, loosening his tie and offering me a sympathetic smile. Just long, I reply, handing him a glass of water, but I think we are finally at the finish line. Over the next 2 days, the atmosphere in the house undergoes a sickening transformation. Daniel becomes noticeably softer, almost excessively attentive. On Wednesday morning, I wake up to the smell of fresh coffee brewing, a chore he has not volunteered for in a year. On Wednesday evening, he offers to order dinner from my favorite restaurant so I do not have to cook. He touches my shoulder as he passes me in the hallway. He asks me, his voice dripping with feigned empathy, whether I'm sleeping at all. It is a masterful performance, but I know exactly what I'm watching. This sudden warmth is not guilt. It is not second thoughts. It is calculated patience. He is managing me. He is ensuring the transaction goes smoothly, keeping the mark comfortable until the papers are signed and the check clears. I mirror his softness flawlessly. I lean into his touches. I thank him for the coffee, and I let my shoulders slump whenever he is watching. I give him the exact version of the exhausted wife he requires, but underneath the facade, my skin crawls. Every gentle question out of his mouth now sounds strategic. He is not caring for me. He is measuring how close I am to giving him what he wants. Thursday arrives with a slow, suffocating tension. I leave for the office early, making a deliberate show of kissing him on the cheek and telling him I have back-to-back meetings all day. I tell him I will not be home until well past dark. I am giving him an empty house and a clear schedule. I sit at my desk at Northline Procurement Risk, staring at the clock on my wall. The hours drag. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. My office is silent. I am reviewing legitimate vendor contracts, but my mind is entirely anchored to the digital tripwire waiting inside my home. I begin to wonder if he got spooked. I begin to wonder if he is smarter than I thought. Then, at exactly 3:45 in the afternoon, my private cell phone lights up. It is a single text message from Tessa. I pick up the phone, my thumb hovering over the screen. I open the message. Got him. The text reads. A second message immediately follows, containing a screenshot of Tessa's monitoring dashboard. The data is undeniable. The decoy packet on my home network was opened at 3:42. The physical pages in the folder were photographed, evidenced by the sudden burst of local network traffic as his phone synced the high-resolution images to his cloud storage. And finally, at 3:44, the digital file was transmitted via an encrypted email client outward. The destination IP address traces directly to the newly leased commercial space across town. He sent it straight to Sierra Vale. I lock my phone and set it face down on my desk. I do not smile. I do not celebrate. I simply lean back in my chair and listen to the steady hum of the city outside my window. He opened the door. He walked into the room, and he locked himself inside. The game of shadows is over. Now, we just wait for the trap to crush him. The state vendor registry system is a slow, bureaucratic machine. But when someone files expedited paperwork, the alerts trigger almost instantly. Less than 48 hours after the digital tripwire caught Daniel stealing the decoy packet from my home network, the final phase of his plan materializes. It happens on a Monday morning. I am sitting at my desk at Northline, reviewing a municipal audit, when Helena calls my direct line. Her voice does not carry its usual measured calm. It carries the sharp electric hum of a prosecutor who just received the murder weapon in the mail. "They filed," Helena says immediately. "I just received the notification from the State Commercial Registry. Vale Meridian Strategies submitted a preliminary operational claim this morning." I push my chair back from my desk. "Tell me exactly what it says." "They are attempting to formally establish Sierra's firm as a transitional operational partner linked directly to Northline's contract portfolio," Helena reads, the rustle of paper audible over the line. "The justification cited in the addendum is, and I quote, 'your planned withdrawal from executive management.' But that is not the best part." I hold my breath. "Did they use the bait?" "They swallowed it whole," Helena says, a cold smile evident in her tone. "The filing attempts to prove their immediate administrative capability by listing your internal accounts. They use the fabricated inactive reserve reference to prove financial stability. And to request vendor transition authority, they submitted the false supplier authorization code. Delta 927 is sitting right here on page 4, filed on the public record under penalty of perjury." I close my eyes. The relief is heavy and absolute. Until this moment, Daniel could have argued that he merely copied some files for his own protection, a paranoid spouse preparing for a divorce. But by using that specific code and that specific fabricated account in a formal state filing, the argument of innocent discovery vanishes, because those references do not exist anywhere in reality. Helena can definitively prove the filing originated from stolen, manipulated material rather than any legitimate marital disclosure. It is documented fraud. "I am putting it in the binder," Helena says, "but I also need you to check your secure inbox. Tessa sent over her final forensic trace on the household accounts 10 minutes ago." I open my laptop and log into the encrypted client portal. Tessa's report is waiting at the top of the queue. I click the document and read the executive summary. She finally pierced the corporate veil of the shell company. She traced the $62,000, the money Daniel had siphoned out of our joint accounts over the last 2 years, under the guise of design retainers and staging costs, straight to its final destination. The funds did not bounce through anonymous holding companies. They were deposited directly into the primary operating account of Vale Meridian Strategies. Daniel did not just cheat on me. He used marital money to finance the very shell company built to undermine me. He bought the shovel to dig my grave using my own paycheck. "I see it," I tell Helena, my voice hardening into steel. "He capitalized her firm." "Yes, he did," Helena confirms. "But there is one more thing, and you need to stay entirely calm when I tell you this." My posture stiffens. "What is it?" "I placed a security flag on all of your personal assets the day you hired me," Helena explains gently. "An hour ago, I received an alert from the commercial lending division at the bank holding the secondary line of credit against your downtown office building. A representative contacted them yesterday, claiming to act on Daniel's behalf. They asked the loan officer what specific documentation would be needed to verify a restructuring event following a marital dissolution. The oxygen leaves my office. The edges of my vision narrow. A cold, absolute fury floods my chest, eclipsing every single emotion I have felt over the last month. The affair was a betrayal. The stolen money was theft. But the building is a desecration. That building came from my father's estate. My father worked 50 hours a week in a distribution center just to make sure I could go to college. When he passed away, his life insurance bought the brick and mortar that houses my firm. It was the first real thing I ever owned outright. Daniel knows exactly what that building means to me. And yet, he is actively trying to entangle it, trying to manufacture a liquidity crisis to force me to sell my father's legacy so he can fund his new life. Morgan, Helena asks quietly, are you still there? I am here, I say. My voice sounds unrecognizable. It sounds like grinding stones. Lock them down. Lock everything down right now. Already done, Helena replies smoothly. I spent the morning securing immediate freezes on all contested marital accounts. I placed notification flags on every single municipal contract, meaning no external vendor can alter the billing routing without my physical signature. I filed documentary holds with the commercial bank and the state registry. Their quiet maneuver is completely paralyzed. I have turned their entire operation into a contained evidence field. They cannot move an inch without hitting glass. Thank you, I say, and hang up the phone. I spend the rest of the day finalizing the quarterly reports, forcing my mind to remain focused on the mundane details of compliance law. Daniel is texting me every few hours, asking about dinner, playing the role of the gentle, accommodating husband. I ignore him. Then, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Sierra Vale makes a catastrophic mistake. It is a mistake born entirely of arrogance and impatience. She is a woman used to bullying distressed business owners into submission, and my silence is clearly frustrating her timeline. She thinks she holds the winning hand, and she wants to force the fold before the end of the week. My private office line rings. The caller ID displays an unknown local number. I press the speaker button. Morgan Allen speaking. Morgan, hi, a polished, artificially bright voice says. This is Sierra Vale, from Vale Meridian Strategies. I freeze. My hand moves instinctively toward the recording module integrated into my office phone console. I press the activation button. A solid red light blinks to life. Every word she breathes is now being memorialized. Hello, I say, injecting my voice with a heavy dose of breathless confusion. I am sorry. Who did you say you were? Sierra Vale, she repeats, her tone carrying the patronizing patience of a teacher speaking to a slow child. I know this is a highly unorthodox call. Morgan, Daniel mentioned that the settlement paperwork was stalling on your end because you are overwhelmed. I am reaching out directly because I want to help make this transition professional for all involved. The sheer audacity is breathtaking. The woman sleeping with my husband. The woman currently using stolen metadata to hijack my firm. Is calling me to offer her professional assistance in managing my own destruction. I remember the role I'm supposed to play. I let out a long, ragged sigh, pitching my voice slightly higher to sound completely rattled. I am just so lost, I stammer, letting the words tumble out. The valuation documents my lawyer gave me just do not make any sense. Daniel said this would be a simple separation, but it feels like everything is falling apart. I'm so behind on everything. I hear a soft exhale on the other end of the line. It is the sound of absolute victory. She thinks I am drowning. She thinks I am so entirely consumed by the emotional wreckage of my marriage that I cannot even read a balance sheet. I completely understand, Sierra says smoothly, dropping into a register of faux sympathy. Corporate restructuring during a marital dissolution is chaotic. That is exactly why my firm is here. If you just sign the continuity affidavit Daniel gave you, my team can step in and handle the vendor transitions. You will not have to worry about the logistics at all. You really think that would help? I ask, letting my voice waver perfectly on the final word. I promise you, Sierra says with absolute confidence. Just get the signed paperwork to Daniel by Friday, and we will take care of the rest. Okay, I whisper, sounding utterly defeated. Okay. Thank you for reaching out. Take care of yourself. Morgan, she says, and the line clicks dead. I press the button to stop the recording. The red light turns off. I sit in the quiet of my office, staring at the phone console. She gave me exactly what I needed. She gave me a recorded admission of an unauthorized third party attempting to coerce a signature on a fraudulent legal document. while explicitly acknowledging coordination with my husband. I pick up my cell phone, dial Helena's direct line, and wait for her to answer. "I have another file for your binder," I say. Sierra Vale thinks she just expedited her hostile takeover. She gave me nothing except the false confidence that I am rattled and late. She has absolutely no idea that she just handed me the final nail for her own coffin. The delay in my signature is beginning to create an invisible friction inside the house. Daniel is a man accustomed to strict timelines, and my manufactured hesitation is throwing off his rhythm. He senses resistance, but because of the careful vacuum I have created around my knowledge, he does not sense exposure. He still believes I am entirely blind to the machinery moving beneath the floorboards. So, rather than panicking, he changes his tactics. He stops acting like a man mournfully leaving a marriage and starts acting like a corporate closer trying to recover a stalling negotiation. It begins on Thursday evening. We are standing in the kitchen, the space between the marble island and the stove feeling more like a territorial border than a shared room. He pours a glass of red wine, sliding it across the counter toward me. His face is arranged into an expression of deep, wounded patience. "Morgan, we really need to finalize these documents by the end of the week," Daniel says, his voice carrying the smooth, resonant cadence of a seasoned mediator. "We both deserve a future without ugly legal theatrics. I'm trying to keep this clean for you. If we drag this out, the lawyers are just going to drain the estate, and nobody wins." I pick up the glass by the stem. The framing is brilliantly manipulative. He is subtly positioning my hesitation as hostility in his constructed narrative. His attempt to quietly steal my company is an act of practicality, and any demand for transparency on my part is an act of aggression. He is trying to make me feel guilty for reading the contract that signs my execution. "I just have a few questions about the administrative transition," I reply, keeping my voice soft, laced with an artificial fatigue. "Some of the phrasing in the continuity affidavit seems complicated," Daniel chuckles, a short, dismissive sound meant to disarm me. "It is just standard boilerplate, Morgan. I actually had a professional look it over, just to make sure we were structurally sound. A consultant named Sierra Vale. She is just consulting on structure, making sure the liabilities are properly separated so your firm does not take a hit during the divorce." The sheer audacity of the lie hangs in the air. It is technically absurd, a blatant contradiction of basic legal boundaries, and emotionally insulting. He is introducing his mistress into our kitchen conversation as an objective third-party advisor, banking entirely on my supposed ignorance. I do not nod. I do not ask for clarification. I simply look at him and let the silence fall between us. I let it stretch for 10 seconds, then 20. I watch the confidence in his eyes waver as the dead air becomes suffocating. He expects me to thank him for his diligence, or perhaps to question the expense of a consultant, when I give him absolute, unblinking silence. He clears his throat and quickly looks away, suddenly very interested in wiping down the pristine granite countertop. That night, he tries a different angle. Leverage and logic failed, so he turns to nostalgia. We are sitting in the living room. The television is off. The only light comes from the heavy brass floor lamps. Daniel leans back on the sofa, letting out a long theatrical sigh, and looks at the ceiling. "Do you remember that awful apartment we rented on Cedar Street?" he asks, his voice dropping into a tender, intimate register. "The one where the heating register rattled every time the wind blew." I keep my eyes on the book resting in my lap. "I remember. We were so broke," Daniel continues, a warm synthetic fondness coating his words. "I remember watching you sit at that tiny folding table, drafting your first business plan until 2 o'clock in the morning. You took such massive risks. Morgan, you built an empire out of absolutely nothing. I was always so incredibly proud of that. I still am. I just want to make sure that empire is protected now. That is all I'm trying to do." I feel a cold, metallic taste in my mouth. A year ago, a speech like this would have brought tears to my eyes. It would have lowered every defense I had. Now, I see the pattern with terrifying clarity. Daniel uses tenderness only when his authority fails. He is weaponizing our shared history, attempting to use the ghost of our early struggles to soften my resolve. He wants me to remember the man who supported me then. So I will not look too closely at the man who is robbing me now. I appreciate that, I say quietly, turning a page in my book without reading a single word. The next morning, my encrypted messaging app lights up with an urgent dispatch from Tessa. I am sitting in my car in the office parking garage when I open the file. Tessa's message is brief, but the attached document is explosive. He is locked in. Tessa's text reads, "Signed a 6-month commercial lease yesterday afternoon. Paid the deposit up front." I open the attachment. It is a copy of a commercial lease agreement for the office space across town. The tenant listed on the document is not Daniel Mercer. The tenant is a subsidiary front company directly connected to Vale Meridian Strategies. He has physically tethered himself to Sierra's corporate architecture. He is far deeper into the conspiracy than a simple exit plan. He has actively committed capital and legal liability to the launch of their competing platform. I immediately dial Helena's direct line. "Tessa sent you the lease?" Helena asks the moment she answers. "I am looking at it right now," I say. "He signed it." "Then the board is set," Helena replies, her tone carrying the sharp satisfaction of a trap finally snapping shut. "I just got off the phone with his attorney. I scheduled a formal settlement conference for next Tuesday at 10 o'clock in the morning. We are going to do this in my conference room." "Did he push back?" I ask. "No," Helena says. His counsel seemed relieved. "They think you are coming to the table to surrender. Listen to me very carefully, Morgan. For the next 4 days, you are a ghost. You show no anger. You show no triumph. You do not give him a single hint that the entire structure he built is already collapsing behind the scenes. You let him walk into this meeting believing he holds every card." "I understand," I say, and I mean it. I spend the entire weekend locked inside the Northline Procurement Risk headquarters. I do not go home to play house. I tell Daniel I have a crisis with a state audit and need to isolate myself to manage the fallout. The building is empty, silent, and entirely mine. I do not spend the weekend crying over old photographs. I spend it reinforcing my fortress. I pull every single client renewal file scheduled for the next 12 months. I review the indemnification clauses, the vendor routing codes, and the service level agreements on Saturday afternoon. I call my vice president of operations and my head of compliance into the office for one-on-one meetings. I do not tell them about the impending divorce or the hostile takeover attempt. I simply tell them we are initiating a comprehensive internal security protocol. I personally reassign the signatory authority on all active regional accounts, ensuring that any external transition request must be verified by 3 separate executive passwords. I quietly secure the company from the inside out, weaving a net of administrative steel so tight that absolutely nothing Daniel touches later can destabilize my operations. I am building firewalls he does not even know exist. By Sunday evening, I am exhausted, but it is a clean, powerful exhaustion. I stand in the center of my executive suite, looking out over the city skyline. I have secured the perimeter. I have locked the vaults. When I finally return home on Sunday night, Daniel is sitting at the kitchen island, reading a magazine. He looks up, offering me that same manufactured, patient smile. "Everything sorted out at the office?" he asks gently. "Yes," I say, setting my bag on the counter. "Everything is exactly where it needs to be." "Good," Daniel says, closing his magazine. "Tuesday will be painless. Morgan, I promise. We will sign the papers, and we can both finally move on." I look at him at the absolute certainty resting on his face. He truly believes the upcoming meeting will be the moment the pressure finally breaks me. The moment I sign away my life's work just to escape the discomfort of a failing marriage. He thinks he is walking me into a surrender. He has no idea that on Tuesday morning, the mask is finally coming off, and I am going to burn his new world to the ground. I wake up at 5 o'clock on Tuesday morning. The house is completely dark, silent, and heavy with the weight of the impending day. I do not linger in the bedroom, and I do not make coffee in the kitchen where Daniel is still sleeping. Instead, I dress in a charcoal gray suit, grab my keys, and drive straight to the Northline Procurement Risk headquarters. I need to be here before I go anywhere else. The office is empty. I turn on the lights in my executive suite, pour a cup of bitter coffee from the break room machine, and sit at my desk. I pull up a dense, complicated compliance framework for a regional transit authority and force myself to read through the regulatory statutes. I spend 2 solid hours anchoring myself in the mundane, exacting reality of my normal work. This is the one thing Daniel never understood well enough to steal. He saw the gross revenue, he saw the municipal respect, and he saw the sleek downtown office, but he never understood the agonizing, meticulous labor required to build the machine. He thought he could just copy the blueprints and inherit the empire. Feeling the rhythm of the actual work beneath my fingertips calms my nervous system. I am not just a woman ending a marriage today. I am a chief executive protecting a corporate border. At 9:30, I leave my building and walk 4 blocks to Helena Price's law firm. The elevator carries me up to the 42nd floor. The receptionist guides me into the main corner conference room. Helena is already sitting at the head of the long mahogany table. The room smells of lemon polish and cold air conditioning. Sitting precisely in the center of the table, directly in front of Helena's leather chair, is the binder. It is massive, over 3 inches thick, and segmented by heavy, brightly colored plastic tabs. I take my seat to Helena's right and stare at the spine of the black folder. I know exactly what lives behind every single tab. The first section holds the detailed timeline of the overheard hallway conversation. The second tab secures the spreadsheet documenting the $62,000 he siphoned away. The third tab contains the digital forensic trail of the stolen decoy packet. The fourth holds the false preliminary state filing. The fifth secures the commercial bank inquiry regarding my father's building. The final tabs hold the gala witness notes and the audio transcript of the call from Sierra Vale. The binder is a physical monument to his ruin, resting quietly on the polished wood. At 9:45, the glass door opens and Tessa Dunn walks in. She's not here to hold my hand or offer emotional support. She is wearing a dark, tailored suit, cut sharp enough to draw blood, carrying a slim leather briefcase. She takes the seat directly to my right, arranging her own financial documents with surgical precision. When Daniel sees her, he will inevitably assume she is here as a supportive, comforting friend holding my hand through a difficult morning. It is exactly the kind of arrogant miscalculation that defines him, and it will make the moment she speaks infinitely more devastating. At exactly 10 o'clock, the heavy doors swing open. Daniel Mercer steps into the conference room. He looks immaculate. He is dressed in a bespoke navy suit, his hair perfectly styled, his posture relaxed and expansive. He carries the distinct, smug calm of a man who firmly believes that private guilt always beats public proof. He thinks whatever objections I have brought to this table are purely emotional. The desperate thrashing of a woman who simply cannot let go of a failing relationship. He is flanked by his divorce counsel, a silver-haired man named Gregory. But behind Gregory walks a third person, a woman in a severe gray dress whom I have never seen before. She steps forward, placing her briefcase on the table, and introduces herself. She is independent corporate representation for Vale Meridian Strategies. The moment I hear the name of the firm, a cold thrill shoots down my spine. Sierra Vale is not in the room. She did not come to claim her victory in person. Her absence and the presence of her attorney immediately tell me that Sierra has finally begun to smell the smoke. She is a scavenger, and scavengers have excellent survival instincts. She no longer trusts her own charm or Daniel's manipulation to fix whatever friction is delaying my signature. She sent a legal shield. Daniel takes his seat directly across from me. His opening posture is incredibly telling. He adjusts his shirt cuffs, sighs heavily, and looks at me with a mixture of practiced pity and mild offense. He is actively projecting the image of a profoundly reasonable man being forced to endure a deeply unpleasant, unnecessary theatrical display. He acts as if my demand for a formal meeting is a childish delay tactic dragging a simple, amicable divorce into the mud. Helena folds her hands on top of the black binder and says absolutely nothing. She yields the floor to Gregory, who immediately yields it to Daniel. It is a brilliant, lethal tactic. She provides them with unlimited rope, letting them speak first into the absolute quiet of the room. Morgan, I really hoped we could do this quietly and privately. Daniel begins, his voice echoing off the glass walls, rich with condescension. This combative approach is entirely unnecessary. We are all adults here. The continuity affidavit I asked you to sign is just a standard operational bridge. Sierra's firm is simply stepping in to maintain your client infrastructure while we finalize the separation of assets. I sit perfectly still. I do not flinch. I let him talk. It is practically a favor to you, Daniel continues, leaning forward, resting his elbows on the mahogany table. You have been exhausted for months. We are just trying to keep your company stable while you process the transition out of the executive chair. In fact, reviewing your recent valuations, I noticed some significant vulnerabilities that need immediate attention. He smiles, a terrifyingly confident expression, completely unaware that he is standing on a trapdoor. You have a large amount of cash sitting idle in a reserve account, Daniel says, using the exact fabricated terminology from the decoy packet I planted on my desk. And your supplier authorization protocols are a mess. Sierra's team can streamline all of that. We are trying to protect your legacy. Morgan, not dismantle it. We just need you to sign the transitional release today so we can begin the work. As he speaks, an eerie, absolute clarity washes over me. I look directly into his eyes, watching him build his own final, inescapable record in front of 3 attorneys. He genuinely does not know. He does not know which document mattered and which one was bait. He believes the decoy packet currently sitting on Sierra's desk is the actual, unvarnished key to my kingdom. He thinks he outsmarted me so thoroughly that he can now use the fake vulnerabilities I invented to justify his hostile takeover. The silence in the room grows incredibly dense as Daniel finishes his monologue. He leans back in his chair, crossing his arms, waiting for me to break down, cry, or finally capitulate. The air pressure in the conference room drops. The stillness is loaded, heavy with anticipation. It feels exactly like the final. Suspended second before 2 cars collide at a blind intersection. You can see the impact coming, but the other driver is still smiling, turning the wheel straight into the concrete wall. I do not look at Daniel anymore. I turn my head slowly, making deliberate eye contact with my attorney. I give Helena a single, microscopic nod. Helena Price unclasps her hands. She reaches forward, her manicured fingers resting firmly on the thick cover of the black binder, and prepares to open it. Helena flips open the thick black cover. The sound of the metal ring snapping apart is as sharp as a gunshot in the quiet room. She does not raise her voice. She does not need to. She simply begins dealing the pages across the mahogany table like a dealer distributing a losing hand. She starts with the ledger. She hands a copy to Gregory, Daniel's attorney, and a copy to the woman representing Vale Meridian Strategies. Helena outlines the exact sequence of the disguised household transfers, highlighting the $62,000 moved from our joint accounts directly into the operating fund of Sierra's limited liability company. Daniel blinks, opening his mouth to speak, but Tessa cuts him off. That was marital capital, Tessa says, her voice cold and absolute, used to secretly finance a competing entity. Tessa opens her own leather briefcase. She distributes the forensic logs. She looks directly at Daniel's counsel, ignoring Daniel entirely. Last Thursday, at 3:42 in the afternoon, Tessa states, your client accessed a secured partition on a private home network. He photographed a master valuation document and transmitted it via encrypted email to Vale Meridian Strategies. That is an absurd accusation, Daniel stammers, his face flushing violently. I was reviewing our shared financial files. I have every right to look at my own wife's business valuations. You have no right to steal proprietary information, Tessa fires back, especially when that information was a fabricated decoy. Sierra's attorney stiffens, her pen freezing over her legal pad. Decoy. Tessa nods. The document he stole contained a false reference to an inactive reserve account and a fabricated supplier authorization code, Delta 927. Neither of those things exist in reality. Yet, 48 hours after the theft, your firm submitted a preliminary operational claim to the state registry citing that exact fake account and that exact fake code. The color drains completely from Daniel's face. He looks at his attorney, but Gregory is staring at the filing copy. Realizing his client just dragged him into documented fraud, Helena leans forward, lacing her fingers together. She looks at Daniel, delivering the most humiliating blow of the morning. You built this entire scheme around the continuity affidavit, Helena says smoothly. You thought if you pressured Morgan into signing it, you could artificially deflate the firm and force a transitional handover. But you did not do your homework, Daniel. She pulls a crisp, watermarked document from the binder and slides it to the center of the table. 3 years ago, after a subcontractor dispute, Morgan restructured the company's operating agreements, Helena explains. She built in a poison pill. That continuity affidavit you pushed so aggressively is legally meaningless without a secondary signatory control certificate. A certificate Morgan never signed, never brought home, and never would have given you. Even if she had signed your affidavit, it would have bounced at the state level. The document you built your entire hostile takeover around was never enough to win. It was only enough to expose you. The silence that follows is absolute. Daniel finally realizes the truth. He was never the mastermind. He was the mark. Helena does not let him breathe. She lays out the rest of the evidence in rapid, surgical strikes. She presents the notification from the commercial bank, proving someone attempted to manufacture a restructuring event against my father's building. She presents the signed commercial lease for the office space across town. Finally, she outlines the unauthorized client contact with Lena Ortiz, turning a quiet infidelity into a fully documented corporate conspiracy. Daniel tries to pivot. He tries confusion first, shaking his head and stammering that there has been a terrible misunderstanding, when Gregory refuses to meet his eye. Daniel pivots to blame. You forced me into this, Daniel snaps, pointing a shaking finger at me. You were always at the office. You never prioritized us. I had to build my own future because you abandoned this marriage years ago. I sit quietly, watching him flail. Every version of his defense arrives too late and sounds infinitely smaller than the mountain of paper sitting between us. When the blame fails, he tries the wounded marriage language. He lowers his voice, attempting to summon the ghost of the man I used to love. Morgan, please, he whispers, his eyes wide and pleading. We built a life together. Do not do this. I do not answer him. I do not have to. Sierra's attorney stands up. She has heard enough to know her client is standing on a legal landmine. She moves with ruthless efficiency. Vale Meridian Strategies formally withdraws all preliminary filings, the attorney states, her voice clipped and professional. We surrender any and all assertions of transitional authority. My client will sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement and acknowledge Morgan Allen's exclusive control over Northline procurement risk, the trust property, and all protected business assets. We are prepared to settle any civil claims today to avoid further litigation. She is cutting Sierra loose. She is abandoning Daniel to the wolves to save her own firm. Gregory looks at Daniel, his expression grim. You need to take the settlement they are offering. Daniel, right now, before they refer this to the district attorney. The resolution is brutal and incredibly fast. Daniel is forced to sign a final separation agreement that leaves him with a fraction of what a normal divorce would have yielded. He forfeits all claims to the marital home, the firm, and the trust properties. He assumes the debt for the commercial lease he signed. He leaves the conference room with full exposure to reputational collapse, possessing no capital, no leverage, and absolutely no future inside the company he thought he could peel away from me piece by piece. When the heavy glass doors finally close behind him, the room feels remarkably light. I walk out of the meeting an hour later. I am not euphoric. I do not feel the urge to scream in triumph or celebrate loudly in the street. Instead, I feel steadied by the profound, clean silence that follows when someone else's lie finally runs out of room. Hours later, the sun has set over Indianapolis. I am standing alone in the lobby of my office building. The space is dark, illuminated only by the soft amber glow of the streetlights outside. I walk over to the staircase and rest my hand on the original brass railing my father installed decades ago. The metal is cool and solid beneath my palm. I think about the woman I was a month ago. The exhausted wife standing in the hallway with a separation packet in my bag, ready to surrender everything just to buy a little peace. I realize now that I did not save my life by fighting louder or striking harder. I saved it by freezing in that hallway, listening long enough to hear the truth, and then simply refusing to sign away what I built. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you enjoyed the story, please like the video and subscribe to the Olivia Revenge Stories channel.